Words About Books is a GMO-free audio supplement that you apply directly to your brain after ingesting it through your ears. It does not cure cancer. Today we're talking about Head Full of Ghosts, a book by Paul Tremblay. And you were the one who picked this book, so why did you decide on this book in particular?
I thought it would cure cancer, but before I go too much further, Nate, who are we?
That's a good question.
You forgot to say who's talking.
Do we actually ever do that? I just remember you saying Words About Books.
I'm Ben, and I'm here with my co-host Nate, and we're talking about blah blah.
All right, I'm Nate, and I'm here with my co-host Ben, and we're talking about Head Full of Ghosts.
Yes. So you were asking why I chose this book.
I was asking that, and I was also hinting at asking you why you decided to have me do the introduction. You'll probably never
asking myself the same question, actually. I decided to have you do the introduction because you had very strong feelings about the introduction of this book. But we'll get to that in a second. So, as to why I chose the book, there were a couple of reasons. We're recording in October. This probably is not going to come out in October. But I wanted to read something spooky because I was in the mood. And I gave you the option of Stephen King or not Stephen King. If you look at any top 10 list or top 100 list of Stephen King book or of Stephen King books, it might as well be, of horror books, any top 10 list of horror books is going to have like 6 Stephen King books, and the other books are going to be like Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, basically things that are already like very popular movies.
Dracula, Frankenstein.
Yeah. So I went looking for a book that was not by Stephen King. So when I went looking for a book that was not by Stephen King, I went to an award I'm familiar with, which is the Bram Stoker Best Novel Award. The Bram Stoker Awards typically focus on dark fantasy, mystery, crime novels, and horror novels. Horror is kind of a difficult genre to pin down, and so there are a lot of disagreements about what does and does not constitute horror. And I would say that Head Full of Ghosts is not the straight up scariest book in the world, but I did think it was a decent book. I liked the synopsis. I hadn't read anything by Paul Tremblay yet, and I hate to admit it, but what kind of sealed the deal was that Stephen King has endorsed this book, which I don't know if you knew, but
I did not until I read it.
On August 19th, 2015, Stephen King tweeted, "A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay scared the living hell out of me, and I am pretty hard to scare."
I disagree.
Well, Stephen King is a parent. That might have something to do with it.
Could be.
But yeah, so this won the Horror Writers Association Bram Stoker Award for the best novel in 2015. And I thought, based on that, it would be a good book to read for Halloween. This is usually the part of the podcast where I would tell you a little bit about the author, and I'm going to try. But I wanted to say that researching Paul Tremblay has been a little bit of a challenge. At the time we're recording this, Paul Tremblay's Wikipedia entry, not counting his bibliography, consists of only about 3 paragraphs of information. The Wikipedia article then pointed to Paul Tremblay's official website, paultremblay.net, which has been confirmed in interviews by Paul Tremblay as an official website. And I specifically went looking for confirmation from the man himself about that, because the website is a Wix-generated cookie-cutter website that has about 90% of its content as placeholder text. It's literally just like, put your quote here. And it's very difficult to determine if it's a joke website or like a website he launched and forgot about. But I've found several interviews where people ask, where can we find you on the internet, Paul? And he points them to this website. I don't know if he's forgotten that he didn't finish it, but it it was one of the most interesting experiences I've had trying to research an author. What I've been able to piece together comes from a handful of interviews posted on YouTube and some articles in various magazines and, ironically, blogs. The biggest media source I could find for him was an interview in the Los Angeles Times. Everything else is a series of small-time blogs and websites and just little niche horror fanzines. But, based on all of my research, Paul Tremblay took a non-traditional path toward writing. He graduated from the University of Vermont in 1995 with a master's degree in mathematics. As far as I can tell, he has maintained his day job as a high school math teacher. Most sources list Paul Tremblay's first published story as God of Roads in 2000. Paul Tremblay began his career as a novelist in 2009 with a crime novel, The Little Sleep, that follows the antics of a narcoleptic detective. He followed that up in 2010 with No Sleep Till Wonderland. Neither novel sold especially well, though a lot of respected authors who were interviewing him have highly recommended both of those novels. And I'm not sure if that's just courtesy to Paul Tremblay or if they're really worth a read, but I might check them out at some point. I'll let you know. The Little Sleep was also nominated for a 2009 Bram Stoker First Novel Award. And in regards to the publishing of A Head Full of Ghosts, his first novel to receive a lot of mainstream success, Paul Tremblay had this to say to the LA Times: "A Head Full of Ghosts is a special book for me. After my debut didn't go very well with Holt, his publisher, I needed to be in a healthier headspace. I was happy to emerge from there. You will always have those negative thoughts as a writer, but you can't let them take over. If you let them take over, those are the real page killers."
So, what he's saying is, even though Edenverse Volume 1 wasn't great, Edenverse Volume 2 still might be.
Well, no, because he wrote a sequel to his first novel that also didn't sell well.
Ah, well, shit.
So, this would be like our third project. Might
Okay,
work.
so Edenverse Volume 2 is dud. But round 3, we're gonna get it right.
Yes, if we completely abandon the Edenverse, we have a chance.
I'm willing to take that chance.
But also, if you learn anything from Paul Tremblay, I guess it's don't quit your day job. I am surprised. He's a very successful novelist. I mean, he's relatively successful. I don't know how much money he actually makes from these books, but he sells books. So it's kind of impressive to me that he kept his day job. He probably genuinely does love teaching. In 2015, Tremblay found success building on his short horror fiction roots with A Head Full of Ghosts, which, as we said, won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel. The film rights for A Head Full of Ghosts were optioned by Focus Features, and I believe a screenplay is currently in development. Since the release of Head Full of Ghosts, Tremblay has written 2 other horror novels. In 2016, he released Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and in 2018, he released The Cabin at the End of the World. The movie rights for The Cabin at the End of the World were optioned before the novel was even released. So I really do think you're going to be hearing the name Paul Tremblay a lot more in the coming years, especially as these movies come out and really build on his fame. One of the interesting things, and one of the reasons I wanted to read this book with you specifically, Nate, is because I know that you are not a huge fan of the horror genre. And just for the audience's benefit, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what it is you don't really like about horror.
So, I didn't really think about much until you asked me and we started reading this book. I think it's something that I just developed early on in my life and then just filed it away in the back of my mind and just never bothered to think about again. So I'm I'm definitely being unfair to the genre, because one of the biggest reasons that I've stayed away from it is because a lot of the horror that I watched as a child came off as like schlock, and I kind of just associated that with the genre as a whole.
Do you remember any particular movie that set you off?
I'm not a huge fan of like gore fests, like Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, here's the thing, and I know you mentioned what even is in the horror genre, because there's also the Goosebumps novels and the show, which are technically in the same. I'm sure they're a subgenre, but they're in the same overall genre as like Nightmare on Elm Street, or, and I hope you laugh when I say this, Leprechaun.
I do. Well, let me pause you there.
I don't think. Sure.
Do you not like the Goosebumps novels? Or as a kid, did you not like the Goosebumps novels? They don't hold up for an adult.
They do not hold up at all. I liked them till a certain age, and then they just really fell off for me.
I don't have my source on this, but I saw an interview with Paul Tremblay where he had a hot take on R.L. Stine.
Oh, shit.
He said that, apparently in an interview, R.L. Stine has said that you can't do horror in the modern day because everybody has a cell phone and they could just call for help now. And Paul Tremblay would set out to prove R.L. Stine wrong. And I don't know if that was with A Head Full of Ghosts, but it might have been. He might have been saying that in reference to The Cabin at the End of the World.
Does he not realize that cell signals don't reach everywhere, and if you're fighting a supernatural horror, it doesn't matter how much help you have?
As a big fan of horror, first off, I don't remember where I heard this. I watched, God, probably 20 YouTube videos on Paul Tremblay. I watched at least 3 interviews. He did a podcast with Brian Keene, who is another horror author who writes a lot of dark apocalyptic stuff where the world ends, there is no upside. And
right.
It never once occurred to me that cell phones would be a problem. If I hear a creak in my house, I'm not calling 911.
It does look like R.L. Stine did say that, or something similar to that.
That's good. I didn't want to accuse him of saying something he didn't say, but there are just so many times where if you're afraid, if that suspense is building, it's not appropriate to call for help. If you hear a creak in your house, you're afraid. You're not going to call 911. If you see a guy in your house, yeah, you're going to call 911, but does that make you feel a lot better? The cops are on the way.
Just hold out for 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah. So I don't know. It seemed like a silly thing for R.L. Stine, a guy who wrote horror books admittedly for children, but still seems like he doesn't quite understand fear, or he's got way more faith in emergency response times than I do. So you say you associated gore and
well, there's also something that I really did not like. And that was the, for lack of a better phrasing, fuck you ending. Like Nightmare on Elm Street, where they beat Freddy and then, nope, fuck you, he grabs her mom. That happened all the time with Goosebumps. It happens all the time with a lot of horror IPs. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's you agree with that?
It does have I agree that it's kind of cheap. It's kind of cheap to have a good conclusion and then undermine it for just one last jump scare. I don't necessarily mind the endings where the bad guys win, or
well, if you're gonna have them win, just have them win.
Yeah,
don't give us the victory and then take it back.
It specifically lulls you into a false sense of security to do a jump scare, and I'd think of the end of Friday the 13th, where as much as I love the Jason Voorhees puppet they made for the end of Friday the 13th, I love Tom Savini, Pittsburgh native. He designed that puppet, but it was kind of dumb to have that scene. It was a dream, and I think the studio made them make it a dream, which was the right call. I'm a fan of horror that has some kind of message or some kind of lesson. I do enjoy just the dumb thrill rides. I go to see pretty much every bad horror movie that comes to theaters. I'm a big fan of the Conjuring movies. The ones that really stick with you, like Rosemary's Baby, one of the more uncomfortable ones to watch. and it doesn't have a lot of gore. None of the Hitchcock movies show blood. Maybe the later ones do. Psycho didn't show blood. Oh, it showed blood going down the drain. It never showed blood on the knife or on the woman's body. I think those were the restrictions they had. But yeah, I think a lot of good horror, the story needs to come first. And it's like with a sci-fi movie too. The story needs to come first, and the effects and the makeup and the gore need to accentuate the story you're trying to tell. They shouldn't be the story you're trying to tell.
Well, it doesn't help that there have been like 400 sequels to whatever is a success, like Paranormal Activity, Saw. Those just seem to churn out a new one pretty regularly.
And Saw
for a long time.
Saw is a great example because that was a really cheaply made movie that had not as many gory scenes as a lot of people remember it having.
Yeah, I heard the first one was actually pretty good, and then they just kept churning out more and more and more.
So Nate, I know you have a lot of strong feelings about how this book begins, and I'm not sure if you were... Well, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to let you go.
So, first I want to go back to Stephen King saying the book scared him. I never got fear from this. I had more of an atmosphere of dread. I don't know, is that kind of your experience, or were you actually afraid at some parts of it?
There were times, I will admit, where I put the book down because I was reading... I usually read before bed, and so I was reading it close to midnight, and it got to a point where I knew things were about to heat up, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna put it down for now because the atmosphere was starting to creep me out a little. I won't say I was ever like heart palpitating, nervous to turn the next page fear, which is also kind of I don't know, it's hard for me to get scared, like to experience the like visceral animal emotion of fear from a book.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
I think it does as good a job as any other book of being scary.
Yeah, I agree. I use the word dread, but yeah. So I want to preface this by saying I thought this was a really good book, and I enjoyed reading this. It kept me engaged throughout most of the book, and I would recommend this. So with that being said, I want to take a moment to shit all over it, bury it. So I went into this completely blind. I don't know much about the horror genre or what makes horror particularly good. And the first chapter is about a 23-year-old girl who seemed to just be over-the-top eccentric and lol random and look at me. And she's telling this story about how, the time that her sister either had a really bad mental illness or she was possessed, and she's telling this to a best-selling author. And when I heard that, I groaned and put the book down for a moment.
Can you explain the trope that you don't like?
So it did not actually turn out to be what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be straight out of a Stephen King book, a writer who's over the top, overindulgent.
The Craft.
Likes the smell of their own farts and talks loudly in Panera about how their work is going to change the world.
That seems very specific.
It is very specific for a reason. That's not what it turned into. But just going on first impression, you hit me with a 23-year-old over-the-top eccentric girl, and then you followed up that with the 1-2 punch of a writer who I thought was going to be straight out of a Stephen King book. And I'm glad that it didn't turn into it. But that's kind of the first impression I got.
What did you think about the present tense?
What do you mean?
Okay, I'm already going to say this is probably only me. The book has 3 different kinds of chapters. It has the interview between the 23-year-old and the author. It has a blog, and it has
we'll get into that.
It has a flashback. The interview with the author is always written in the present tense. I sit down, not I sat down. That was so weird to me. It was a neat way of conveying the difference between the present day and the past, but like I don't know. For some reason my brain was not ready for that.
Yeah, I didn't even notice it. I usually only notice it in books where they switch up the tensing,
They
like
did.
in the same chapter.
Oh, well, they didn't in the same chapter.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I didn't even realize that.
It
It
took
didn't
me.
stick out to me.
I don't know. Do you ever have that experience where you're reading a book? Like, if you read a series of books, you're good. But then when you switch authors, do you have to read the same paragraph like 2 or 3 times to like adjust your brain to this author's style of writing?
I haven't yet.
I have that problem all the time. Maybe I'm just weird.
The next chapter is a blog about a girl named Karen Brissett, or Brissetti, or who cares?
And she lives in a society.
She, she is reviewing a reality TV show that's based upon the possession of that little girl. It's called The Possession. And the writer of this blog, now you disagreed with this, but it seemed like they were either freshmen in college, or I could even see like a 14-year-old on a Zanga account from back in the day. Just a really immature, grading style of writing. They use the phrase in all caps, because Karen said so, and dun dun dun. She breaks down how The Exorcist and The Possession are about the collapse of the patriarchy. And this was a continuation of that first impression, because this was the second chapter. And if we were not on a group read, I would have stopped right there. This sucked. I hated it. What do you think?
Oh, I really didn't like it at first. There's not many of the blog post chapters in the book. I didn't know what to make of it at all. I went looking, and I've heard people who said that they thought the blog posts were a really interesting device. I am familiar with the type of content that Tremblay is trying to describe here. There is like a meta horror community. I can think of a lot of YouTubers. That's my main exposure to it. Nightmare Expo does strange things happening around the internet, and he talks a little bit like this. You know, there's also a lot of like subreddits that deal with these things. I don't know. I can't tell if it's my own lack of exposure, because if Paul Tremblay teaches high school, then, well, he talks to more teenagers than I do. But I've never met the person that talks like this. You know, I made the joke that she says like that she lives in a society, and you know, you mentioned she talks about patriarchy in The Exorcist, and I actually think there's an interesting case to be made there for, is The Exorcist reinforcing patriarchy, either unintentionally or intentionally? But she never goes into it. She never makes an intelligent point about. She references a lot of social justice concepts, and then she never goes on to make an intelligent point about the social justice concept. And
for a while, we actually thought it was an insult at their expense.
Yeah, I almost thought he was trying to make fun of people who talk about patriarchy. And I didn't get the vibe that was the kind of guy Paul Tremblay was. You know, having read the whole book, having seen a bunch of interviews with him, I definitely don't think he's mocking social justice concepts. I think he liked the character in the blog posts. I think he thought she was funny and quirky. And it did not translate to me. Whatever he was going for did not translate to me with these blogs at all. And I did look, and Paul Tremblay was 44 years old when he wrote this. And perhaps the last time he really read an article written by a teenager was back in the Zanga days. I had not as strong of a reaction as you did, but I definitely was like, I could not imagine an editor reading this and not saying, take that out.
Cut it. Yeah, it decreases the quality of the book overall by B.
I think the third blog entry, which is towards the end of the book, finally gets into the meat of some of it, and then the perspective of the blogger becomes an interesting perspective that we're not getting from any of the other sources in the book. The blog is partially used as a meta commentary and an information dump. And interestingly enough, when the blog is at its most tolerable, when he's doing the information dump, because he briefly loses the voice of Karen.
Yeah, it was grating. It was horrible, cringeworthy, terrible, and shit.
Like I said, you felt more strongly than I did.
I hated it. The third one was the only one that was even tolerable. The other two were just god awful. So it started to pick up after we got rid of those two first chapters. The book is largely a flashback around a family of four. The 23-year-old telling the story in the first chapter is Meredith. She goes by Mary. And in the flashback, she's only 8 years old. She's living with her sister Marjorie, parents John and Sarah. Marjorie is 14 years old, and she's begun to act really strange recently. And at the same time, tensions are mounting in the family. John was laid off when the company he worked for went bankrupt, and he's leaned into his religious teachings in lieu of finding a goddamn job. Sarah she stopped worshiping God years prior, and so this renewed faith is straining an already rocky marriage. It's not helping anyone. Marjorie, she's acting strange as the story opens. Mary comes into her room to hear a story. Normally, she illustrates little stories with fun, cute animal creatures, and they go on lighthearted adventures, and the day is saved, and everyone's happy. This time, however, Mary comes into the room. Marjorie's room, all the stuff is like shoved into the four corners of the room. And on the wall, she's stacked and arranged all of her posters in a crooked manner that overlaps so that it's just a mass of limbs with a pair of teeth in the middle. Marjorie tells her that she woke up and the room was just like that. She also has one of Mary's books that she said she stole without Mary's knowledge. And this is when she admits she regularly goes into Mary's room while she's asleep. She watches her sleep, she takes her stuff, and she is never detected by Mary.
Can I add in a random point?
Sure.
So this all takes place near, like, in New England, right?
Yes.
And the dad worked at a toy factory.
Was it a toy factory?
I think it was a toy factory.
Oh my god, is Peter Griffin?
This is first season Family Guy. This is first season Family Guy.
Oh my god. That company did get laid off too. Or bankrupt. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Holy shit. I never connected those dots. We're gonna have to make a YouTube video now about the secret meaning, the theory of Family Guy's connection to this.
That's just a theory.
Oh god.
A book theory.
Good god. Alright, so Marjorie, she's gonna illustrate a story this time, like she always did. Except this time, it's a story about the Great Molasses Flood, or, as it's hilariously named, the Boston Molassacre.
God damn it, Boston.
Except with animal people. She goes into detail on how all these anthropomorphic animals are crushed and drowned by a tidal wave of molasses. And for those, side note, this is a real event that happened with real people, I want to say in the early 1900s.
Yeah, and like dozens of people died, and
yes.
They do call it the Molassacre.
Yeah. It's like, what a lighthearted, funny thing to call bunch of people being killed.
Oh, Boston.
Yeah. So after she tells this horrific story, she says that it just popped into her head. She woke up and she had this story in her head, and it causes Mary to run crying from the room because it's kind of a dick move to tell a horrible story to your kid like this, or your kid sister.
Do you have a sister?
No.
Noted.
Noted.
I may have convinced my sister she was adopted and had her pack a bag when we were.
Oh my god!
I told her we were going to give her back to her real parents, and she packed up all her stuff and she brought her backpack down. And my mom was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm going back to meet my real parents." And my mom's just like, "Ben."
Wow, I thought I had it bad with my older brother. That's on a whole new level. I'm glad I did not grow up with you. So from there, Mary did not pack up all of her things. She instead sets up a bunch of traps to catch Marjorie coming into her room and stealing her stuff. So she takes the book with the Boston Massacre, and yes, I'm going to say that every time. She takes that book and she builds a tower of books on top of it, so that if that book is removed, the tower will fall over. She then tied an empty jug of orange juice to a string so it would fall on her if the door was open. And then she used her stuffed animals to stand guard. That one was less of a trap though. And when she wakes up, the book was replaced by another book, but the book tower was intact. The jug was still on its door, and there was a note from Marjorie that she was pinching Mary's nose while she slept until Mary had to open her mouth and get a gasp of air.
I'll add to that Mary also made like a cardboard laptop, and
That's true.
She also has a cardboard house that's going to become very important later. The cardboard house is one room, obviously, and built to look like Marjorie's room. So whenever Marjorie rearranges her room, Mary secretly rearranges the room in the cardboard house as well. But yeah, we don't know what kind of engineer Mary really is. Like, we don't know. These traps sound foolproof, but I'm skeptical.
She did have some cardboard security cameras that linked to that laptop.
Didn't even turn them on.
Yeah, that was a bonehead move.
Amateur.
I'm really disappointed in Mary.
I mean,
all right,
you kind of are.
I will say, Mary as an 8-year-old, a lot more endearing than Mary as a 23-year-old.
Pretty much because Mary as a 23-year-old is the same as Mary as an 8-year-old.
Yes, she just stopped growing up. So next, we, the reader, are introduced to John and Sarah. John wants the family to say grace because, again, he's not getting a fucking job. He is going hard on this religion. No one else says grace with him. He is shown to have a bit of a temper problem, and that's an understatement because when he gets upset at the table, he starts yelling at his family. And then Sarah gets after him for yelling at them, and then he does kind of a limp apology. Maybe I should have just said he does an apology. You can choose what you want to keep in there.
You have some strong feelings about John and his religion, don't you?
You know, I don't mind the religion. I mind the fact that he's doing this instead of getting a f***ing job and supporting his family.
We both talked about it. This is probably a good time to mention this.
Sure.
I also have a big problem with John as a person. John has been out of work for what? A year, 2 years at least at this point?
Yeah, he's been out of work for a while.
At that point, man, you go get a job at Walmart. Like,
yes.
You don't just do nothing all day. From minute one, I did not like John. He has a temper, and the blog post initially, she's talking about patriarchy because she's talking about the way John is framed in the reality TV show The Possession. John is framed as like this blue-collar, middle America guy who is just trying to do his best in an economy that left him behind, and the author of the blog seems to not like John at all either. Part of John's thing is like he really does seem to have a chip on his shoulder about being the head of the household, despite not being the protector or the provider. The mother is the provider, and she still does her fair share of the housework and all that stuff while John is at home yelling at people. I did not care for him.
Yeah, John's a piece of shit. Seriously, if I became unemployed and had no degree or anything, yeah, go to Walmart, go to McDonald's. You can't afford to be picky because people are depending on you, you jackass.
Or at the very least, why is mom making dinner? Like, John,
Yeah,
make dinner.
I think they make a point that he's not doing anything.
No, he's not picking up the housework. Like, at the very least you could do if you're not working is that house is spotless and dinner is made. John is acting like he's still the big provider and the breadwinner, despite the fact that the mom's working, the mom's doing the housework. All John does is just sit there, and like all the inadequacy John feels, that's not anything to do with the economy. Didn't do that to John. John is not a victim of circumstance. John is a victim of John's ego.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this dinner, going back there after John explodes on them and just is not a good person. There's some talk that Marjorie has been going to appointments. Mary doesn't know what those appointments are yet. It's pretty clear it's some sort of psychiatric appointment. Marjorie starts asking strange questions about what if you go to heaven and you don't recognize that it's actually not heaven, and everyone and they're demons impersonating your family, and how would you tell the difference? I don't know if she was trying to come up with Capgras syndrome, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but I know how to spell it, so shut up.
I have
Where
no
you
idea
think
what you're talking
it's
about.
where you think that people have replaced your loved ones with imposters. It's a psychotic delusion. I don't know if she was trying to hint at that or what. I guess it's not too important. I'll just move on.
Well, no, actually, that's really interesting because I think you might be onto something there. I don't want to get too far ahead of the summary, but this is really not the first time. I mean, this is not the last time she brings up the idea of how do you know I'm me? Obviously, an exorcism takes place, and during the exorcism, one of the things she says is, how do you know you exorcise the demon and not me? How do you know that my soul is the soul that stays in this body? It seems to be a recurring thought she has. So
Good point.
I don't know how much Paul Tremblay really knows about mental illness or how much he researched this, but another interesting thing that I wanted to call out that I guess I didn't think much about until we started talking about the summary again is that up until this point, everything we see is through Mary's eyes. And the first time Mary notices Marjorie acting strange is when she tells that strange story with the book. But obviously, if Marjorie is going to psychiatric appointments, her behavior has been strange to the parents for a long time.
Yes.
So I think that is an interesting thing to mention. I didn't think about that particular delusion, but that is a reoccurring one, and good catch.
All right, so the next part is Marjorie continues to act stranger towards Mary specifically, because as you said, it is from Mary's perspective. Mary goes into Marjorie's room, and Marjorie thinks the room is different when it's not. Mary says it looks exactly the same, but Marjorie seems to feel like it's somehow different. Then Marjorie tells Mary a new story about weird plant things that grow up and destroy all of civilization. Their mom disappeared going to the grocery store while the rest of the family sought shelter in a place where seemingly the things can't grow. Eventually, they're slowly starving, they're slowly going crazy. Their dad leaves to go find food and tells them not to open the door for anyone or anything and don't go into the basement. So they go into the basement, obviously. And when they do, they find little plant things poking through the basement, through the ground. And as they start to grow, they pull their mother's corpse out of the ground. She had been killed and buried in the basement. And that's when they realize their dad killed their mom, and they hear a knock on the door, the front door, and they were afraid because what if it isn't their dad, and what if it is? And then the story ends, and it leaves with Mary running the hell away, crying again. What did you think? Any thoughts on that?
I thought it was a cool story. I think he actually published the Growing Things as a short story.
I think it was a collection of short stories.
Yeah. First off, I actually really enjoy the chapters where Marjorie tells stories. Paul Tremblay's past as a short horror fiction author really shines through Marjorie's stories there. The Growing Things chapter was one of my favorite chapters. I don't want to summarize it anymore because then we'd basically just be reading it to you. But all I can say is our summary doesn't do it justice. That is, by itself, if you just take that chapter by itself, a really good short story.
I agree.
Growing Things was creepy. I definitely liked that. This was kind of where I started to really like the book. I was like, yeah, Marjorie's a creepy kid.
Now, I thought I filed this back in my brain. I put it away as something that could happen maybe in the book, that the father is going to kill the mother. What did you think? Did you think that was a possibility or no?
At this point in the book, though I do not like John's character at all, I thought he seemed like a pretty typical guy. Like, they mentioned he has a temper, and so I did wonder if he would be capable of abuse, like physical abuse, but there hadn't been signs of anything like that yet. It seemed more to me that Marjorie was telling a story as an allegory for their parents' divorce. It seemed like there was definitely animosity building between the mother and the father, and that the father really was just crumbling under his own inability to move beyond losing his job. And eventually, if he didn't want to seek help, or he wanted to seek religious help, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it didn't seem to be working for him. And the mother was becoming overwhelmed by basically being a single parent who also had a big guy sometimes yell at her. And I think
an adult man-child.
Yeah, and so I think Marjorie, the vibe I got was that Marjorie was sensitive and smart enough to have picked up on the feelings in the house and to have invented a really creepy story about it. Like, the fact that Marjorie told this really great story showed that she was intelligent, and the fact that she was picking up on her father being inadequate and jealous of the mother, and to some extent, like, the choice of poison. Like, if Marjorie were afraid of her father being like a physical threat, like, he didn't strangle the mother, he didn't stab the mother,
that's right, he poisons.
Yeah. And so that to me seemed like he couldn't even face the thing he was doing. It seemed to me like Marjorie just thought very little of her father, and she wrote a story about the dynamic in her house.
That's some pretty good insight. Yeah, that seems to fit with what comes next. Marjorie wakes up screaming one night. Her parents are attempting to calm her down, but doesn't really work out. She starts saying a bunch of consonant-heavy non-words while clinging to her bedroom wall like a spider. She also starts freaking out her sister more by drawing leaves from the Growing Things story on her hand and around her room and on the cardboard house in her.
I want to describe that in a little bit more detail because that was another thing I found genuinely creepy, and I love this stuff. So, from Mary's perspective, Mary sees Marjorie clinging to the wall like a spider by, like, just sort of peeking around the door, like her parents are trying to get Mary out of there. And then Mary goes to sleep, and when she wakes up, the first thing she sees are these little cartoon vines drawn in magic marker on the side of her cardboard house, growing up and all around it and choking it. And then she looks down at her hand and sees a little thing drawn on her hand that tells her that Marjorie was in her room again, did all of this while Mary was asleep, and Mary didn't hear it. Mary's traps didn't go off. And that really contributes to Mary's growing dread that Marjorie is perhaps capable of supernatural things. Or Mary's traps suck. We don't know yet.
Because of the incident Marjorie has in the middle of the night, Dad decides that taking her to this psychiatrist, it's not working out. You know what's really worked out really well for him personally? Religion. And so, why not take Marjorie to see a priest rather than to her regularly scheduled appointment? That pissed me off so much to read.
Because you hate religion?
No, because, well, I hate when people no-show appointments.
There's one thing I want to add here. This is the one day that Dad is supposed to take Marjorie to the appointment. Up until this, the mother has been taking Marjorie to all the appointments. When they're in the car on the way to the appointment, so eventually Dad has to admit to Mom that
he's a chicken shit.
He didn't take her to her psychiatrist appointment.
Right.
Which specialists do tend not to enjoy when you skip appointments, and it can make it very hard to get another appointment. And so the mom is freaking out, and the dad says that he took her to a priest, initially intending to stop at the church on the way to the appointment. And the reason he gives the mother for doing that is that Marjorie was saying things to him that disturbed him. She was accusing him of... I think she was accusing him of being, like, sexually interested in her.
Yes, that's correct.
And I found it very suspicious that, A, the psychiatrist specifically requested that the father bring Marjorie to this appointment, indicating that the psychiatrist specifically wants to talk to the father and Marjorie, or at the same time, or maybe separately, but the psychiatrist is looking to get some information from the father that he can't get from the mother. And Marjorie starts saying these very uncomfortable things to the father. I don't know if they're true or not. In the book, we're not given any indication that John is anything other than just woefully inadequate. Well, at least, I don't know about that, actually, the more I think about it. But I found it very suspicious that when Marjorie was saying these things, the father, instead of taking Marjorie to the independent, medically trained third party, he takes her to a priest who is on John's side. And she never makes her appointment. And as far as the book goes on, I don't think the father ever takes Marjorie to a psychiatrist appointment.
No, I don't think he does. I read this on Reddit initially. Someone theorized that Marjorie had suffered sexual abuse, and I thought at first, were you reading the same book as me? Like, I didn't see any of that. And then I started talking to you about it, and then you pulled up this part, and it does kind of connect. It's not overtly stated. It's never confirmed one way or the other, but I can see how you might think that it's certainly possible that she suffered some level of sexual abuse. In people with schizophrenia, it's a combination of genetics and an environmental trigger, and oftentimes that environmental trigger is physical or sexual abuse.
Marjorie accuses damn near everybody of being sexually interested in her, even Mary at one point. On one hand, it seems like the kind of thing a possessed girl is supposed to say. She's supposed to say uncomfortable, blasphemous things. And of course, a father being sexually interested in his daughter is an uncomfortable, blasphemous thing. Except in some parts of the Bible, we're not going to talk about that. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know. I would accuse John of physical abuse. I think in the book, not specifically at this point in the book, but with all the material and all of hindsight, I am prepared to say that John crossed the line a couple of times. I don't know if he was chronically abusive, but he crossed the line, and I think John, maybe he honestly thinks that religion is what she needs, but no small part of this, I think, is John being afraid of what that psychiatrist is going to learn. And the fact that John will never speak with this psychiatrist, that's fishy to me.
I agree, absolutely. while Dad is talking with the priest, they're in the car. The priest, I think, is in the front seat with Dad. Marjorie's in the back seat. And Marjorie gets better while Dad is talking with the priest. Per Marjorie's own admission, she hardly even spoke to the man, if at all. It was mostly Dad and the priest talking, and Marjorie calmed down. Mary tries to stick her nose into this and learn more. I think it's a natural thing for a child to do, figure out what's going on with your sister, especially Mary. She happens upon Marjorie in the sunroom. Marjorie's humming a song called Gloomy Sunday, which is a Hungarian song associated with suicides. And she said this is another thing that just popped into her head. Then, over the course of her talk with Mary, she threatens to rip her tongue out if she continues to get involved in her affairs. Anything on that before I move on to the next night's dinner?
There's a couple of things that happen in the sunroom. One of which is the song you mentioned.
She does mention the fastest prescription pad in the West.
She doesn't. Well, that's something you should take note of. She doesn't like her medication. She doesn't think she needs her medication, and she doesn't want to take it. She doesn't like the way it makes her feel. And she thinks that her psychiatrist is too quick to prescribe medication. The reason she threatens to cut Mary's tongue out is that Mary has told the mother about the stories Marjorie's been telling Mary. And the mother has confronted Marjorie about that, and Marjorie got in trouble. So Marjorie says, can't keep your mouth shut. I'm going to cut your tongue out, and then I don't have to worry about you telling people what I said. It really is a quick scene, but it was one of the more, dense...
I was about to say, it's so dense.
Yeah, it's one of the more dense...
Every frame in this chapter. So much going on.
But there is so much going on because you get precious few glimpses into Marjorie's treatment and to the conversations the parents have with Marjorie when Mary's not around. And this is also the first time that Marjorie threatens Mary physically, and I don't know if she means it. I don't know if this is the time to talk about it or not, but what do you think Marjorie's feelings are towards Mary?
I got the impression that, to a degree Marjorie was the older teenage sister looking at her younger sister who was trying to copy her. She liked her, but she was a little annoyed that she was entering her private space when, I don't know if you had that as a teenager. I certainly was trying to just hang out in my own space as much as possible and got annoyed when people entered it. So that's kind of what I got from Marjorie. But I did get the sense that she cares about Mary. Probably more than anyone else. But she's got this disease, which has kind of changed her entire world. What do you think?
I agree that she cares for Mary probably more than she cares for anyone else in the family. Marjorie has a very, to put it delicately, strained relationship with her father. I don't think she likes her father very much at all. I think she's having more typical teenage rebellious feelings towards her mother. She's not really enjoying her mother's oversight. The reason I ask about the relationship with Mary is because I wonder if maybe threatening to cut her tongue out, because she goes into a lot of detail about what she's going to do and how it's going to look and how it's going to feel. And to me, that was one of the first times I was kind of afraid for Mary's safety from Marjorie. I think Marjorie kind of crossed a line because I mentioned, I scared my siblings. I played pranks on my friends. I never threatened to maim anyone, On one hand, I feel bad for Marjorie, but yeah.
Well, I was a little afraid for Mary's well-being, but the fact that she had a tongue at the age of 23, I knew that she wasn't going to have her tongue torn out or cut out.
You're using your out-of-game knowledge in-game.
But
quit metagaming.
I was more willing to forgive her for this because the disease itself can cause aggression, anger, irritability. I was more willing to blame the illness than to blame the person.
Now you say illness like there's a good chance she's not possessed by a demon.
I know. Isn't that funny?
Did you ever think she was possessed by a demon?
Maybe towards the beginning when she said her room was rearranged and she had all the posters, but when she started just being a normal girl with a mental illness, that's when I was like, okay, I don't believe that she is possessed at all.
And so I have to say, this is kind of, I know we always spoil every book on every podcast because we do the full summary, but we try to go in order. I don't want to jump ahead. I will say though, it's never explicitly confirmed what was wrong with Marjorie, or whether or not she was possessed, or whether or not she had any kind of supernatural or psychic power. I think, in my interpretation, and I know Nate agrees, she was mentally ill.
Yes.
There was nothing supernatural going on. This was a medical problem that was not addressed adequately and, in fact, actively made worse by the circumstances she was put in.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I guess you're just going to have to, if you're a person who has a different take and thinks there was something supernatural going on, you're just going to have to bear with our snarkiness.
Yeah.
Because
you're more than welcome to share your opinion with us and back that up with why you think that way, but there's nothing in this book that made me think, oh, there's a supernatural.
There were a few things that made me think maybe Marjorie had some psychic potential or something. Like there's just a few moments of serendipity in the book that could easily be coincidence, or could be Marjorie had some predictive power, or buried in the delusions was a true vision. I don't know. I like supernatural stories. I'm a hardcore skeptic, I guess, but I like to think I'm fairly open to the possibility of the supernatural, but I'm not willing to see it where it's not there. And so I enjoy like the movie The Exorcist. I don't mind going along for a ride of something overtly supernatural, but yeah, I can't see Marjorie being possessed by a demon. And I don't think Paul Tremblay intended that she be possessed by a demon. I think when he was writing this book, his truth was that she was not possessed.
I think the mental illness aspect is actually scarier. Like you said, Stephen King, he's a father. So maybe he's afraid, like, shit, I hope my children don't have schizophrenia or don't develop.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that.
So, as I saw it, there are two possibilities for the book. The real, actual, horrible tragedy of seeing someone you love consumed by a disease that will alter them forever, and there is no cure. There's treatment, but no cure. And to have all of your hopes and dreams for your child, what they could be, taken away from you forever. Or a goofy demon possesses a girl who makes her rude and mean, and as we're about to get into, masturbate like in the movie The Exorcist.
You always handle these things with such finesse.
That's what I'm known for. So let's get to the bloody masturbation, shall we?
Oh, let's.
the next part, the thing that happens first though, is they're at another dinner, and Mary, her skin is mushroom gray. This is the one thing I was like, how was that? She starts vomiting all over her spaghetti, and then she hides under the table. Her dad comes up with the brilliant solution of, I'm going to pray this way. I really gotta stop. I don't have a problem with religion. Okay, for real, I don't have a problem with it. It's just so hard to separate the shithead John from his religion. So, I don't have a problem with religion. I have a problem with John. I think religion can offer some good supports, and it can really provide to people in need, or just in general.
I'll defend you a little bit, because the way that religion is presented in the book through John and through the character of Father Wanderley, who's going to come in a little bit later, is very cynical and very, very much a caricature of how I think it is for a lot of people. There are definitely people out there who are into praying in place of medical treatment, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that is the majority of religious people at all. This book is obviously it's using the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is the church that is most famous for doing exorcisms because of the movie The Exorcist. The view of religion presented in this book is very cynical and very stupid. Multiple people, it's like I really, my experience with Catholics even, like my experience with a Catholic is if you had a priest come visit Marjorie, the priest would recommend the psychiatrist. I know there are churches out there who would happily jump to exorcism, but even in the movie The Exorcist, the priest doesn't jump to exorcism. The priest recommends medical treatment. And it is only after overtly over-the-top, ridiculous supernatural powers are displayed that they go into exorcism. It's tough to describe John without sounding like you're coming down on religious people, because I think to some extent the book is coming down on religious people a little harder than I think is fair. I don't know what Paul Tremblay's personal experience with religion is, but I definitely think there is another side, a much more reasonable side of religion in America that is not presented in this book.
I agree. Father Wanderley comes off as a buffoon and probably corrupt.
We will talk about how the exorcism comes to get approved and everything, I think probably in the next episode, unfortunately. But I cannot imagine in the real world a real Catholic archdiocese approving this exorcism.
Yeah, you're right. The book kind of makes religion look really dumb.
I know where you're coming from when you say, like, of course John wants to pray it away. Like, yeah, of course John wants to pray. But let's be real, too. John knows very little about his own religion. Most priests, like 99.9% of priests, don't ever even consider the possibility of doing an exorcism because mental health is a real thing, and they know that. Interestingly enough, the movie The Exorcist was much kinder. Well, I shouldn't say interestingly, because the guy who wrote it was a believer. It was much kinder to the religion, and it presented them as being somewhat skeptical and analytical and having ways of determining whether or not this was a demon versus a mental illness that are much more rigorous than the methods used in this book. I'm sorry. Please go on.
No, it was a good aside, because, yeah, I didn't want it to come off like I was just shitting all over religion. Anyway, let's bring it home. End of part one. So John sticks his hand under the table to pray, and he doesn't really know what to say. And while he's trying to clumsily pray, Marjorie either bites him or scrapes his hand across like a rusty bolt in the table. She then starts making a bunch of different voices saying everyone there is going to die, and she goes up to her room. And I think that they skip ahead in time, because I don't think there's any fallout from that. It goes right to Mary walking in on Marjorie recreating The Exorcist. Wait, I don't think she had a cross. I think it was just...
We're going to keep this PG-13.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marjorie is...
Read the book or watch The Exorcist.
So with the combination of what happened at the dinner with Marjorie doing voices and making weird body movements and threatening to kill everybody, kind of, and also with the controversial masturbation scene, the family is now realizing that they're losing control of the situation. They're running out of money to be able to support Marjorie's treatment, and things are looking increasingly desperate and increasingly grim. One thing we didn't really talk about that is sort of in the background throughout the book is the family's ever increasing austerity. They go from eating spaghetti with meatballs to eating spaghetti with red sauce to eating like spaghetti, like,
and eating it every single night.
Yeah, they are struggling.
Because again, John does not want to get a fucking job.
Well,
I can't drive that home enough.
Yeah, so the financial pressures put on the family are becoming increasingly severe to the breaking point. Marjorie is going to be hospitalized for a brief time after this incident. We see the incident through Mary's eyes. Mary really doesn't understand what's going on. We're not sure if Marjorie has physically hurt herself or what exactly is happening, but she's definitely becoming increasingly unstable. She's getting worse, not better. And part 2 is going to pick up with some of the hard choices the family has had to make to pay for Marjorie's treatment and really to secure their own financial futures as well, which becomes a little bit problematic. And that is something we're going to get into a little bit more on the next episode. Give you a heads up now. Head Full of Ghosts is written in 3 parts. We are going to be covering it in 3 parts. Next time, we will hit all of part 2. After that, all of part 3, and a little bit of our final thoughts and what we're going to be reading next.
Like he just said, we're going to be doing the next 2 parts for Head Full of Ghosts, so if you haven't read it yet, there's still time to read it to get in and follow along with us. The next book we're going to cover after that is called The Fold by Peter Clines.
All right, and with that, we will see you next time. Try not to get possessed by any demons out there.
Or catch schizophrenia?
Yeah, I mean, if you can avoid it.
Words with Books is a GMO-free audio supplement that you apply directly to your brain after ingesting it through your ears. It does not cure cancer. Today we are discussing A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Ben, why did you decide on this book in particular?
Well, first, that's not the name of our podcast.
What did I say?
Words with Books.
All right. We're off to a fantastic start.
Take 2.
It's words about books.
Yes. Yes, it is.
All right. We're off to a fantastic start. All right.